Hello, and welcome back to another video to fall asleep to. In this video, we will be talking about England cricket. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Think of a game that can last for 5 entire days and still end in a draw. To the uninitiated, it is an absurdity. It is a game of baffling rules, strange terminology, silly mid-off, googlies, sticky wickets, and infuriating weather interruptions. But to understand England, you must understand cricket. It is the nation's summer soul. It is a sport that perfectly mirrors the English character, a deep reverence for tradition, punctuated by moments of absolute, breathtaking eccentricity. But the history of England cricket is not just a chronicle of runs scored and wickets taken. It is a story of empire, class, rebellion, and a relentless, century-spanning psychological war with a penal colony that grew up to beat the mother country at her own game. Let us turn back the clock. Act 1. The Village Green and the Doctor. We begin not in a massive stadium, but in the damp, green fields of rural England in the 18th century. Cricket started as a peasant's game, played with shepherd's crooks and lumps of wool. But soon, the aristocrats noticed. They realized that this strange game of bat and ball was the perfect vehicle for their favorite pastime, gambling. Wealthy lords began drafting the best local players, blacksmiths, bakers, farmers, to form private teams. The most famous of these was the Hambledon Club in Hampshire. This was where the laws of the game were truly forged. It was a brutal, unsophisticated era. Bowlers bowled underarm. The pitches were treacherous. But as the 19th century dawned, the game found its first deity, a man who dragged cricket into the modern age. His name was W.G. Grace. The speaker paces slowly across the stage. Imagine a Victorian leviathan of a man, a massive, untidy black beard, a thick waist, and a towering ego. W.G. Grace was a doctor by trade, but on the cricket pitch, he was a mercenary. He revolutionized batting, inventing modern stroke play. He played the ball off the front foot and the back foot. He was so famous, so dominant, that he effectively dictated the rules. There is a famous legend, perhaps apocryphal but spiritually true, that after being given out early in an innings, Grace simply refused to leave the pitch, telling the umpire, "They came to watch me bat, not you, umpire." And he stayed. Grace made cricket a national obsession, but a national obsession requires a national team, and it requires a rival. Act 2. The Birth of the Ashes. In the late 19th century, England was the undisputed master of the globe, and they took cricket with them wherever they sailed. They brought it to India, the West Indies, South Africa, and, crucially, to Australia. For years, English teams would tour Australia and beat them comfortably. It was the natural order of things. The mother country teaching the colonials how to play. But in 1882, the natural order collapsed. Australia came to play England at the Oval in London. In a low-scoring, tense, and violent match, an Australian fast bowler named Fred Spofforth, nicknamed the Demon, tore through the English batting lineup. England needed just 85 runs to win. They collapsed. They lost by 7 runs. The English public was in a state of shock. It was a national humiliation. A sporting newspaper, the Sporting Times, published a mock obituary that read, "In affectionate remembrance of English cricket, which died at the Oval on 29th of August, 1882. Deeply lamented by a large circle of sorrowing friends and acquaintances. R.I.P.N.B. The body will be cremated and the ashes taken to Australia." That winter, the English captain, Evo Bligh, sailed to Australia, vowing to reclaim those ashes. During the tour, a group of Australian women presented him with a tiny, delicate terracotta urn, supposedly containing the ashes of a burnt cricket bale. It is the smallest, most fragile trophy in international sport. Yet, For over 140 years, England and Australia have fought a brutal, blood and thunder war over it. The Ashes had begun. Act 3. The Gentleman's Game loses its innocence. As we move into the 20th century, cricket was heavily divided by class. There were the gentlemen, wealthy amateurs who played for the love of the game, and the players, working-class professionals who were paid a wage. They even entered the field through different gates. But the horrors of the First World War stripped away much of this polite Edwardian facade. And when sport resumed, it was about to get ruthless. In 1930, Australia unleashed a batsman upon the world who defied the laws of physics and probability, Sir Donald Bradman. Bradman wasn't just good, he was a machine. He scored runs with a terrifying, mechanical consistency. England literally could not get him out. So, in the winter of 1932, the English captain, Douglas Jardine, devised a plan. Jardine was an aristocrat, arrogant, icy, and wearing a multicolored harlequin cap just to annoy the Australians. Jardine realized that Bradman, like all men, had a physical preservation instinct. If you bowled the ball at the stumps, Bradman would hit it. But what if you bowled a rock-hard leather ball directly at his head and heart, at 90 miles an hour, with a ring of fielders waiting to catch the ball as he flinched? This was body line. The speaker stops, looking directly at the audience. It was completely legal, and it was incredibly dangerous. English fast bowler Harold Larwood battered the Australian batsman. Skulls were fractured. Ribs were broken. The Australian crowds nearly rioted. The Australian government threatened to sever diplomatic ties with the UK. It was an international incident. England won the Ashes. They stopped Bradman, but they lost their moral high ground. The gentleman's game had been weaponized. The rules were quickly changed to outlaw bodyline, but the innocence of English cricket was gone forever. Act 4. The Wilderness and the Miracle. Let us fast forward to the late 1970s and 1980s. The British Empire is gone. The country is gripped by industrial strikes and economic gloom, and the England cricket team is facing a terrifying new reality. They were no longer the bullies. They were the bullied. The West Indies had assembled the greatest array of fast bowlers in the history of the sport, a quartet of terrifying speed that physically battered the English batsmen series after series. England spent a decade looking thoroughly outmatched, retreating into a defensive, terrified shell. But amidst the gloom of 1981, a miracle occurred. England was playing Australia. They were 1-0 down in the series. In the third match at Headingley, England was forced to follow on. The bookmakers in the stadium put the odds of an England victory at 500 to 1. The game was dead. Enter Ian Botham. Botham was a working-class hero, a man who loved a pint, loved a fight, and hit the ball with the blunt force of a sledgehammer. Stripped of the captaincy just days before, carrying the weight of a miserable nation, Botham walked to the crease and decided to just swing. He smashed 149 not out in an innings of pure, feral defiance. He turned the game on its head. The next day, his teammate, a wild-eyed fast bowler named Bob Willis, tore through the Australians, taking 8 wickets for 43 runs. England won. It remains one of the greatest comebacks in the history of sport. Botham became a god. It proved that English cricket, even when backed into a corner, possessed a chaotic magic. Act 5. The Greatest Series and the White Ball Revolution. But magic is not a sustainable strategy. By the 1990s, Australia had re-established absolute dominance. For 16 long, agonizing years, Australia held the Ashes. They had Shane Warne, a man who spun the ball like a wizard. They had Glenn McGrath, a metronome of fast bowling. England was a laughing stock. Until 2005. The speaker's voice drops to a hushed intensity. The 2005 Ashes series is widely considered the greatest series ever played. It was the summer that cricket reclaimed the front pages of the British newspapers. Under the captaincy of Michael Vaughan and fueled by the talismanic Andrew Flintoff, a modern-day Botham, England finally stood up to the Australian bullies. Matches were won by 2 runs. Wickets fell in the dying light. It was 2 heavyweight boxers trading blows for 5 consecutive weeks. When England finally lifted the tiny urn in London, an estimated 7 million people lined the streets for their victory parade. But the hangover from that victory was severe. In the decade that followed, the sport changed. The invention of T20 cricket, a fast, frantic, 3-hour version of the game, revolutionized how batsmanship worked. Players were scooping the ball over their heads, hitting sixes for fun. England, stubborn and traditional, resisted. They stuck to their old, polite ways in limited overs cricket. This culminated in the 2015 World Cup in Australia and New Zealand, where England played an outdated, fearful brand of cricket and was humiliatingly knocked out by Bangladesh. They had hit rock bottom, and from that rubble, a revolution was born. The captain, an Irishman playing for England named Ewan Morgan, essentially burned the playbook. He demanded his team play with absolute, reckless aggression. If you get out trying to hit a 6, fine, but never, ever take a step backward. It worked. Over 4 years, England became the most feared one-day team on earth. This culminated in the 2019 World Cup final at Lord's. It was a match that defied logic. Tied after 50 overs. Tied again after a sudden death super over. England won the World Cup on a boundary countback rule, the barest, most absurd of margins. It was pure theater. Act 6. Bazball. The speaker walks back to the center of the stage, bringing the story to the present day. Which brings us to today. Having conquered the white ball game, England's traditional 5-day Test cricket team found itself in a dire slump by 2022. They had won just 1 of their last 17 matches. The team looked paralyzed by fear. So the English Cricket Board made a radically un-English decision. They handed the keys to 2 men who do not believe in fear. They made Ben Stokes, the hero of the 2019 World Cup, captain. And they hired a fiercely aggressive New Zealander, Brendan McCullum, as head coach. The press dubbed their new philosophy Bazball. It is not just a tactic, it is a psychological rewiring of the sport. Stokes and McCullum told their players to treat a 5-day Test match like a T20 game. They score at 5 runs and over. They declare their innings closed early to force a result. They refuse to play for draws. They would rather lose spectacularly in the pursuit of a win than survive for a boring stalemate. It has terrified purists and utterly thrilled audiences. They chased down impossible targets against New Zealand and India. They went to Pakistan and won on pitches as flat as concrete. They have stripped the fear of failure from the heavy historical shoulders of the England shirt. The speaker takes a slow, final breath, looking out into the dark. So, what is the history of England cricket? It is the story of a nation constantly battling its own rigid traditions. It is a pendulum swinging between polite, agonizing failure and spectacular, chaotic brilliance. They invented a gentleman's game, only to discover that the world they taught it to had no interest in being gentlemen. And so, century after century, England has had to break its own rules to survive. From the heavy roller on the village green to the hyper-aggressive Bazballers of today, the heartbeat of English cricket remains exactly